Welcome back. He was once known, I must tell you, for a routine about words you can't broadcast without fear of the law. But George Carlin is recognized for many comic talents that are indeed safe for public consumption. He joins us now to discuss a new album, Jamming, in New York, among other team developments, and we're pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Thank you,
It's
John.
good to have you
Pleasure
here.
to finally catch up with
Yes,
each other.
sir. We tried once on Night Watch, and
That's right.
You were somewhere else. When was there a change in your? I mean, there seems to me that some people think of you as sort of this. I mean, you tell me. I'm going to project on you. What is this stereotype of George Carlin that is out there? It's almost like he's a relic of the past, rather than a guy who's contemporary, who's totally sort of evolved.
I don't hear it that way because I live in here.
Right.
I do a home box office concert every 2 years,
Right.
and that keeps me contemporaneous with all parts of the population because it cuts through age,
Right.
education. Every bit of the demographic pie is cut right through with something like home box office. So I've done 8 of these shows.
Right.
I do one every 2 years. So I see at my concerts, I do about 120 concerts a year. I see people from the age of 14 through 55. And the current work is, by my measure, the best I've done yet. I finally learned how to do this. It was sort of on autopilot for a long time.
Do this being stand-up?
The stand-up, well, the whole arc of creativity that the art requires, right from the initial observations, the things you read, what you draw from them, the things you hear, what you retain, the notes you make, how you file them, how they reach critical mass, what you pull out, how you write it, how you say it, and how it finally takes shape over a period of 2 years on stage until you do it for the TV camera.
But is most of your year spent just going from stand-up to stand-up to stand-up?
Yeah, this is primarily what I do. I'm also Mr. Conductor on the PBS morning show,
Right.
Shining Time Station, and I do an occasional movie
Film,
role.
right.
But primarily I am a spoken artist, and I do comedy monologues. And there are 3 strains that run through my work. The English language, fun with words, fun with phrases, things we say. Things that could be called political and social, although not really narrowly so. They're not jokes about Washington figures.
But about environmentalists and
or killing people,
Right.
or men and women trying to live together on the planet. Things that are truly political, in the true sense. And then the other is the little things, the little world. What's in your refrigerator, how you drive your car, how you tie your shoe, stuff you keep in the attic, the things that make us all the same. The big issues keep us apart. The little things make us all the same. The language is how we unite the two. So.
And how much evolution has there been, though, between in the last, say, 10 years in you and your thinking about comedy?
Well, a lot, simply because I am now 55, and and your matrix, your storehouse gets richer. You know, there's just more texture. The things you see now have much more stuff against which to be compared, so the comparisons are richer, and therefore what you feed back out through your filter has a little more depth, I hope, and it has more experience behind it. It has more a pattern to it. That's the best way to put it.
There was a time, in fact, there was a time, maybe several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe you had Roseanne, and you had came to television, and Richard Lewis had a television show, and a lot of the people from Saturday Night Live were going on to make films, and Steve Martin became a film actor, and a lot of people were saying the best breeding ground for whatever you want to do in the entertainment world was stand-up comedians. Those were the people who were going on to have the widest arc. Is that still true, you think?
Well, I know that it is generally true that many people enter stand-up comedy seeing it as a stepping stone to sitcoms or movies, to some form of acting, either comedy acting or otherwise. But I saw it that way myself in the 60s when I began, and I hit a stone wall because I flat couldn't act.
Yeah. How'd you find that out?
It's on. You can see it. It's on a That Girl episode. It's on a Doris Day movie called
That Girl
Six You Get Egg Roll.
Right, with Marlon.
And I just lacked all composure at it. I mean, I had no instinct for it. I thought I did. It wasn't there.
But you're in Prince of Tides?
I have grown. I'm older. I'm wiser. I am more comfortable in myself now, and I can reach for things. I was a very self-conscious young man in the 60s. I was a man in the wrong skin. I was acting like a a kind of middle-class mainstream guy when underneath I was a lifelong rebel and a man who was out of step. And I kind of was trying to play their game to be an actor.
Right.
Wrong place, and it was inauthentic. It just didn't ring true, and that's why it made such a loud noise.
It seems to me that, I mean, that one thing is true about show business, and I know very little about it. It is that if you can find your own authenticity, whether it's as a writer or whether it's as a performer or whether it's as an anchor on a television program, that then you're at least on a step towards becoming something. That because only then can you appear different, and only then can you reach in and find something unique that no one else has.
My comedy didn't explode out from me, nor did it explode in terms of its acceptance by the public until I was doing authentic comedy, until I had changed that period I just described to you, when I was sort of cardboard and doing sort of superficial things from the front of my mind.
And you were substituting for Johnny Carson and all that stuff?
No, that's later.
Okay.
I'm talking now when I was guesting on Ed Sullivan, guesting on Steve Allen, guesting on all of these variety shows, no beard, straight suit, tie, and all that, and doing these cute little things. Good material, but superficial. I was doing the hippy-dippy weatherman, wonderful wino, the newsman, the daytime soap operas. I was imitating quiz shows and things, and they were fine, but they were all parody on media. When I finally dropped that pose and found myself in 1969 and 70 and let my appearance change to be more in tune with who I was inside, that's when I began saying things that came from my gut.
And that's when you did the HBO specials that sort of really caught on?
That's when I began my album career, which led to the home box office specials. That's when I did these 3 albums that are in that are in the other package that's out now, a thing called Classic Gold. There were 3 albums in a row that went gold for me. They were very good for me. FM and AM, Class Clown, and Occupation Fool. They included the 7 words you can never say on TV, which went to the Supreme Court. They included the stuff about growing up white in a white Irish kid in a black neighborhood uptown here. They included Catholic schooling and all the repression that went into that. This was when my stuff took off because it was authentic, and people knew that.
70 was 22 years ago. Are you as much a rebel today in terms of how you view the world
I've
as
retreated.
you were?
Yeah, I've retreated from it. I've decided that if you really stay in it and think there's a solution, you're part of the problem.
And so
at least from the standpoint of my art. I have pulled away, and I now reside out where the Oort cloud is, where the comets gather. And from that perspective, I have no stake in the game, and I can really make my commentary mean something. I don't have to think, well, maybe there's a little hope. Well, maybe this will work. Well, maybe that guy will save us. I can say, wrong, 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 and I can do it from my perspective. So in that sense, I'm more rebellious, but in the sense of being able to get along in the world, I'm less rebellious.
How about political humor in terms of the kind of thing that we see a lot of stand-up, Leno, for example, doing, and Carson used to do?
Well,
does that...
Without insulting either of them, that's very, very surface political humor. It's sort of like Bob Hope. It's kind of topical, and it's about political figures, but Mort Saul would be a more accurate model for political humor, someone who digs into the meaning of things, at least as far as we can know that. The others do topical. They do it well. It's entertaining, but it's not truly, to my way of thinking, political satire.
How do you go about preparing a body of work for a concert, before a stand-up?
Well, the pieces take form in the files. Every time I look at my files, every time I add something, I'm forced to run it through my mind again. And the constant running through those neural paths, if you don't mind me getting a little high-minded sounding here, it is an actual fact. The more you are forced to think about something, the more connections the brain will make. The subconscious does all the work. All we do is skim it off, really, from time to time. So I let things fester. I encourage myself to read my files and to build on them as they're there.
When you say your files, what do you mean?
I'm talking about raw notes that have been put away. They're now half disk.
Yeah.
They're half word processor files, and they're half raw paper of old-fashioned type in file folders. I'm in the process of changing them, and every word I change from one format to the other changes along. I mean, each sentence grows a little. So they just assume a very special extra weight one day and say, gee, this thing is ready. I got to tell them this. This is good. I got some things that connect. It's the connectedness that makes the paragraphs. The sentences are all in there, but you have to find the paragraphs.
When do you know it'll work? I mean, only after you, can you feel instinctively yourself?
You can. You'll be wrong 10 or 20% of the time. But the 10 or 20% of the time that you're wrong, it's because you're saying the idea wrong. You're couching
it's the delivery rather
yeah,
than the idea.
Right. You haven't gotten the paragraph the way it should. The idea is pretty good, or you wouldn't have written it down and saved it all that time. But you haven't quite got it straight. And then you'll try and try and try and try. And one night by accident, it will happen the correct way, and then you save it.
But if it happens the correct way by accident?
I tape every show.
Oh, so that's how you know.
Yeah, I can. And when I know a good show, after a good show, I stop and take a few notes and say, listen to X, listen to Y, listen to Z.
And do you tell by the audience or just what you feel, or that's
the moment? It's the audience plus me, but you know, from the audience is the proof that it works. But you know in your heart that's the way it ought to sound.
Who do you see that reminds you? I mean, you see a line from you, Mort Saul, to you, although you were.
He was good to me. He helped me get on the Tonight Show once before I was ready.
Who else is in your before you're ready?
Well, in a way, I went on and nothing else happened to me for 3 years.
Who's in your family, within the family of Carlin and Saul now?
I don't know, but because of this, here's the reason I don't know. Because to me, it seems as though every comedian who breaks through at a certain level, after a breakthrough level, really are unique. They're just not like each other. I mean, Seinfeld and Gary Shandling are not like each other. Each is really unique, and they bring you one experience, and they bring you a different one. And we all have something different to offer. I can't make comparisons.
And can you find, if you looked at all of them, Seinfeld and Sandling, and Sandling's doing, well...
He's doing a cable show.
He's doing Larry Sanders show. Do they share some minimum thing other than they make people laugh or they make people think?
It has to do with a skewed attitude. It has to do with the way you filter the world. The decision you made one day at 4 years of age, or maybe in the womb, or maybe at 20, when you decided one day, this is all wrong. And
they don't understand, and let me explain it.
This is a circus, and I'm going to enjoy this while I'm here. And meanwhile, I'll narrate it for the folks. Yeah. It really has to do with that, with the frame of mind, the attitude toward the world.
Here is the thing. This is Time Magazine, May 18th of this year, in which this is where I got this idea I wanted to ask you about. Okay. Carlin is unfairly pigeon-toed, however, as a leftover 60s radical. The real targets of his satire are cant and cliche, phoniness and self-righteousness, wherever he finds him. And it goes on. This is, I think, a review of one of the HBO. Carlin Live at Paramount.
Jamming in New York. Yeah, unfairly stereotyped
why I picked up that idea
radical.
That you somehow...
Yeah. See, because the initial burst was the long hair. What happened was I was 30.
Right.
The 20-year-olds were at war with the 40-year-olds. I was 30, and I didn't belong to either of them. But my heart and my philosophy and my values were with the youth culture. I believed what they believed. And I was making believe I was in the 40s set by entertaining them. I was entertaining their enemies.
And what was the affinity with the youth culture?
Just my values, just what I believed. I believed in freedom of expression. I thought it was a repressive society. I felt most of the things that were articulated by the counterculture in the late 60s and early 70s were things I believed in, and I was in the wrong camp, so to speak.
Do you have any sympathy? I mean, are you on Howard Stern's side because of this battle he's having with the FCC and this huge fine that he's gotten?
Yes, of course.
Because you've been there.
Well, my case, it wasn't my case, it was Pacifica Radio versus FCC, but it was my
your
record.
8 words.
It was my record, yeah. Of course. You know, there are 2 dials on the radio, and one of them turns it off, and one of them changes the station, and what a marvelous technology that a person can walk over and say, I don't like Howard Stern, I think I'll listen to Joe Blow. The answer is never in closing down the message. The answer is finding your counter-argument or rejecting the message out of hand if you don't even want to listen to it.
How you think, how do you think we're doing today? I mean, when you look at this election, you had some interesting things said about the Persian Gulf and about environmentalism and a lot of other things. But when you look at Clinton and you look at the country today, I mean...
Well, I hope more people will come to the table now. I think they will. I mean that in the sense of sharing things that are material, including food. My brother had a terrific description of it. I don't vote, and I really don't.
You don't vote?
No, I don't vote. Voting implies the consent to be governed, and between you and me, I do not consent to be governed. I prefer
to be a true anarchy position.
Yes, I prefer to be outside of it. It gives me my freedom. But my brother made a good point, because we were pulling for Clinton, being somewhat left of center in general, not narrowly in this
Clinton,
country.
Bush, and you said Clinton.
He said, I think if there were just one cherry pie, and Clinton had it, think I'd get a piece.
Yeah.
And I think if Bush had it, he'd keep the whole pie. And I believe that. And therefore, I'm rooting for him.
What if Perot had it?
He'd buy 100 more pies, and I still wouldn't have a piece. That was my addendum to what my brother said. But I pull for Clinton because people are going to invest hope in him, and I think I think being on this planet, one of the first things people would say, if we were all dumped down here, let us say there were only 10 of us, and we were dropped into this planet already formed. One of the first things we would say after a moment or two would be, is everybody okay? Let's get something to eat. And that should be the first thing any society says. Is everybody okay? Let's get something to eat. And we don't, because we have this private property thing. Property rights over people's rights. And I just think that competition got the upper hand over cooperation. This species was successful.
Because, as part of the American experience?
No, as part of the human species.
The human species.
The verge of failure that we're on is because two wonderful qualities that made us a successful species, cooperation and competition, are way out of balance now. Competition is everything. Cooperation happens after a flood. Happens for a few days. Yeah, everybody goes back to where they were before.
Happen after
That's
hurricane.
Right. And we need to get that balance back. If we can get that balance back, there's hope.
Some sense of community values.
Communitarian idea is a good one. It's an excellent idea.
What was your take on the Persian Gulf War?
Well, my particular take was not so much, I was using the Persian Gulf War as a metaphor, or as a vehicle, let me put it that way, as a vehicle for a larger complaint that men who feel sexual prowess is everything have to demonstrate this metaphorically through their weapons, and that rockets and bullets and bombs are all shaped like penises, not by some accident. And then I used more of the language than strictly clinical, yes, to make these points that largely it's an exercise in standing astride someone and being able to look down and say, America never stood tall. Or Ronald Reagan says America must stand tall. It's easy to stand tall when you have your foot on someone's neck. So it was just a complaint about militarism and about the confusion of psychosexual. That it's an expression of some sexual inadequacy, some perceived need to demonstrate sexual prowess and superiority. That's what I believe that. I'm not alone. I didn't get the idea. It's not my idea.
No, I know. Is the record business good to comedians these days? Is that a place where you can?
I don't know. I think because cable.
Because they sent me these cassettes of yours.
The idea for me, I came from disc jockey land. I was a DJ for 4 years.
And the career path was you going to, as you said earlier, going to go from disc jockey, stand-up comedian, to comic actor.
To be an actor like Danny Kaye. That was my model, like Danny Kaye. But it worked out well the other way. I'm glad I fell short at that time because I enjoyed my
But have you, in
comedy.
your mind, actually fell short? I mean, have you said, even though you do Prince of Tides, which I thought
I was happy with that. I'm happy. I can act now. I know that. I just hope some other people will get a chance to find out. The answer on records is, no, they only mean something to me because they're finite, they're tangible, they can be put on the shelf, and I can point to them and say, there's my record.
A book.
That's right.
That's me.
There's what I did.
That's what I did.
So that's why
but with Prince of Tides,
yes.
Does it give you some inspiration that whatever you might have stopped, wherever you came to some plateau and said, I'm happy doing this and I'll take this, you might now feel a little bit more momentum building up?
I feel I can open myself up now. I couldn't do that those days I talked about. When I ran into the brick wall and couldn't act, it was because I didn't know who was inside, and I was the last person who was going to open up and let him out, whoever he might have been.
And when you found yourself, you then had more chance of finding yourself as an actor.
I have more confidence in what's in there, and I can show a lot of things that aren't expected of a comedian, emotions that we all have that I think we're shown a little bit in that Prince of Tides.
Streisand help you?
She was very good. She let me do the work. She trusted me and let me do the work, and to that extent, she helped. Yeah.
Pleasure to have you.
Charlie,
thanks
very
much.
I appreciate it.
Me
My
too.
pleasure.
George Carlin. The album is called Jamming.
Jamming in New York's the new one. The old one's called Classic Gold.
And HBO every couple of years.
That's right.
Leroy Neiman is here, and he'll be out with some new paintings. Back in a moment. Stay with us.